Ever wondering why your team feels disconnected, your meetings feel hollow, or your leadership just isn't landing the way it used to? You're probably blaming the wrong thing. Today, we're going to play a game I call Leadership Killers. And by the end, you'll know exactly what's sabotaging your connection with your team. Here's what I see constantly. Mid to senior level leaders, brilliant people who've built incredible careers, suddenly hitting a wall. Their teams aren't engaged, innovation has stalled, and despite working harder than ever, they feel more isolated than they did 5 years ago. The question everyone asks is, what is causing this disconnect? Here's my hot take. Most leaders are focusing on the wrong culprits. They're blaming hybrid work or generational differences or quiet quitting. But the real leadership killers are hiding in plain sight. And today, we're going to expose them tournament style. I've identified 8 common suspects that leaders blame for disconnection in teams. We're going to pit them against each other bracket style until we find the ultimate leadership killer. Here's what makes this different from typical leadership advice. We're not just identifying the problem. We're going to look at it from my framework for connected leadership, specifically how it affects your ability to receive, perceive, and respond effectively. Let's start with round 1. First up, too many meetings versus not enough meetings. Here's what most leadership books don't tell you. The number of meetings isn't the problem. I've seen teams thrive with daily hurdles and teams thrive with monthly check-ins. What matters is this. Are you actually receiving what's happening in those meetings? Or are you just checking boxes? Picture a leader sitting in their back-to-back meetings all day. They're physically present, but mentally, they're already 3 meetings ahead, thinking about 47 emails that are unread and piling up. That's not a meeting problem. That's a receiving problem. Winner! Too many meetings, but only because it creates more opportunities for disconnected presence. Matchup 2, lack of clear processes versus drowning in processes. I remember working with a healthcare executive who told me, we need better systems. So they implemented 3 new tracking mechanisms, 2 additional approval layers, and mandatory weekly status reports. 6 months later, innovation had completely stalled. Their team was spending too much time documenting their work that they had no energy left to actually do the work. Here's the thing. She was trying to control her way to connection. More processes felt like leadership, like she was providing structure and clarity. But what her team actually needed was for her to perceive what was really happening. They weren't confused about processes. They were confused about priorities, about what really mattered. The winner? Too much processes because it's control masquerading as leadership. Matchup 3, remote work culture versus in-office politics. And let me tell you, this one's everyone's favorite scapegoat right now. If we could just get people back in the office, everything would be better. And let me tell you about 2 leaders that I coached simultaneously. One led a fully remote team across 4 time zones. The other led an in-office team where everyone was 30 feet within each other. The remote team had the highest engagement scores in the office. The in-office team, they struggled with trust and collaboration. The difference wasn't location. It was that the remote leader had learned to create intentional connection points. Moments where she genuinely received her team's concerns without trying to immediately fix them. The in-office leader, well, he was physically present but emotionally unavailable. His team could see him through the glass walls of his office, head down, door closed, projecting "don't bother me" energy. Proximity doesn't create connection, presence does. The winner? In-office politics, because at least with remote work, you're forced to be intentional about connection. Last matchup of round 1, unclear expectations versus constantly shifting expectations. Both of these are symptoms of the same root issue, but one is definitely worse. Imagine you're on a team where your leader says, just do great work, but never defines what great is. That's frustrating, absolutely. Now, imagine you're on a team where every 2 weeks, your leader redefines what great looks like. Next month it's speed, the next month it's quality, then it's innovation, then it's cost cutting. That second scenario isn't just frustrating, it's destabilizing. Your team can't build momentum because they're constantly pivoting to chase a moving target that the leader hasn't learned to hold steady. This is the pivot gone wrong. Remember the basketball metaphor? One foot stays planted while you adjust the direction. Here, both feet are constantly moving. That's not pivot, that's chaos. The winner? Constantly changing expectations because it destroys the foundation that's actually needed to execute. Now we're going to get to the real leadership killers. Round 2. Too many meetings, too much process. Both of these create the same outcome, exhaustion. But here's the distinction that matters. Meetings, even too many of them, create opportunities for connection. Yes, they're often wasted opportunities. Yes, most meetings could be emails, but they contain the raw material for leadership, human interaction. Too much process, on the other hand, specifically designed to remove human interaction, is designed to create predictability and control by eliminating messiness of the actual human connection that we strive for. When you implement layers of process, what you're really saying is, I don't trust the human element here. I need the system to work regardless of who's involved. That's the antithesis of connected leadership. Winner, too much process because it's systemic disconnection, not just situational exhaustion. Second, semifinal, in-office politics versus constantly changing expectation. This one's tougher because they both create toxic environments. But let's think about recovery time. In-office politics are terrible. They create silos, drama, and distrust. But here's the thing. They usually have identifiable sources. You can name the dynamics, you can address the behaviors, and constantly changing expectations, that's coming from the top, from leadership. And when you're the source of instability, when you're the one who can't decide what matters, you're creating something worse than politics. You're creating existential uncertainty. Your team isn't just dealing with interpersonal challenges, they're questioning whether their work even matters, whether their efforts are valued, whether they should even bother building towards anything, because it'll change next month anyway. That level of instability doesn't just affect performance, it affects identity. It affects whether people can connect to themselves, let alone you as their leader. The winner? Constantly changing expectations, because it's a deeper form of disconnection. All right, we are down to our final 2. Too much process versus constantly changing expectation. And here's what's fascinating about this matchup. These are actually 2 sides of the same coin, but they're symptoms of a leader who has not learned to conquer control. Think about it. When you implement too much process, you're trying to control how the work happens. When you constantly change expectations, you're desperately trying to control what happens, searching for the magical formula that will finally deliver you the results you need. Both stem from the fundamental misunderstanding of leadership, the belief that your job is to control outcomes. Yet, here's the truth that transformed my own leadership journey. The only control that you truly have is how you receive, perceive, and respond. So which one of these is the ultimate leadership killer? The winner? Constantly changing expectations. Here's why. Too much process is at least stable. Your team can figure out how to work with it or around it. They can build strategies. But constantly changing expectation, that eliminates your team's ability to respond effectively. They can't build momentum. They can't deliver mastery. They can't create sustainable excellence because the target keeps moving. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. When leaders constantly shift expectations, they're not just killing team performance, they're killing their team's sense of inherent value. Remember the avocado principle? Your value doesn't change based on others' opinions. But when expectations shift constantly, your team members start believing their value does depend on hitting a moving target that they can never actually hit. That's not just a performance problem, that's a human problem. So what's the antidote? This is where the receive, perceive, and respond method becomes your leadership superpower. Receive. Before you change another expectation, take a beat and pause. Actually receive what's happening with your current priorities. Are they truly not working, or are you just uncomfortable with the normal challenges of execution? I watch leaders abandon solid strategies, not because they're failing, but because progress feels slower than they'd like. That's not strategic pivoting. That's impatience masquerading as decisiveness. Perceive. Get curious about why you feel compelled to keep changing direction. What are you afraid of? What are you trying to prove? Often, constantly changing expectations is a symptom of a leader who hasn't recognized their own inherent value. They're searching for the perfect strategy that will finally prove they're enough. But remember, your worth isn't determined by a perfect execution. Your worth is inherent. Respond. Once you've actually received what's actually happening and perceived your own patterns, you can respond from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. The basketball pivot becomes your guide. Keep one foot planted. That foot represents your core values, your fundamental purpose, your commitment to your team's well-being. Then adjust your direction based on real-time information, not based on anxiety or external pressure. Here's what that looks like in practice. Instead of announcing another strategic shift next Monday, you might say to your team, I've noticed I've been changing priorities frequently. That's created instability for you, and I take ownership of that. Here's what we're committing to for the next quarter, and here's my commitment to what we're seeing through, even when it feels uncomfortable. If this resonates with you, if you're recognizing yourself in any of these patterns, I want to offer you something. I've created a virtual mind on Delphi where you can dive deeper into my framework for connected leadership. It's like having a conversation with me anytime you need to work through a leadership challenge. And right now, you can gain insider access completely free until December 31st of this month. No credit card, no strings attached, just practical guidance when you need it. You can visit drkara.net to connect with my virtual mind or click on the link in the description. Here's my final thought. Leadership disconnection isn't happening to you, it's happening through you. And that's actually good news because it means you have more influence than you think. You can't control whether your team engages. You can't control market conditions or organizational politics, but you can control how you receive what's happening, how you perceive the challenges, and how you respond to pressure. That's where your leadership power actually lives. So stop trying to control everything around you and start connecting first to yourself and then to your team. That's how real leadership transformation happens.